This video illustrates how to get started with Visual Basic Studio 2010. After you have started Visual Studio 2010 from the Start button located at the lower left-hand corner of all Windows machines, then the initial screen that appears will look like this. This is not the initial configuration that you will need to start building your projects. To do that, you need to make sure that you have chosen a new project. Now, this is done because you can start Visual Studio with a number of different languages. So in order to start a new project, you need to go to the File menu and select New Project from there, or if you prefer, there's an icon on the Tools menu at the far left which is also used for creating a new project. So either choice, start up a new project. When you click that button or select New Project, then you'll see this dialog box. Now there are three things in here that are important. The first one on the left hand side is the language. Here you'll see that Visual Basic is the language that's already selected, and that's because I've been using it. It is possible that when you open up your version of Visual Studio, then it will have another language listed here. You can see those other languages here from the Other Languages tab. So there's some C languages in here and some other things. You want to make sure that those are not the language that you're initializing when you begin your new project. So ensure that you have chosen Visual Basic. Then in the central panel you'll see a number of options. The one that you want is already highlighted in gray. That's Windows Form Application. So select Visual Basic, Windows Form Application. Finally, the third thing you need to do is to type in a name for this project. The default name is Windows Application 1, so that's not a very descriptive name. You need to use something that is meaningful to your project. And since this is an example, then let's just name this my first project. Okay, so now that you've done those three things and you've given this a name, then click OK. This will bring up Visual Studio in the design view so that you can begin to build your project. When this window appears, then you are ready to start building your project. Let's take a look at the different sections of your Visual Studio 2010 work environment. First of all, there's a title bar up at the very top. All Windows applications have those. And in this one, you'll notice that the name that you have chosen for your project will show up here. This says My First Project, Microsoft Visual Studio. Below that, there's a menu bar, and this should be familiar to all of you. There are a number of menus, and this environment is very complicated. It's very powerful. You can do a lot of things with it. However, we're just going to be using a small amount of this power that's available to us. So the menu bar is shown here. Below that is the toolbar. We'll be using a few of these. So these shows at least some of the tools that are already available to us when this starts up. Now for the important windows. On the left hand side we have what's known as the toolbox. Now this is not to be confused with the toolbar, which is up here. This is the toolbox, and it goes with the Visual Basic language. So here there are a number of things that you probably will recognize. You've seen these on websites and other applications, and we'll be using these to build an interface for the projects for Visual Basic. In the middle we have the design area, and this says Design at the top, and this thing is called a form. It is this form that you will use in order to design an interface for your projects. On the right hand side there are two windows showing. The Solution Explorer at the top right. Also note that it also has the name that you chose for your project here. And then below that we have the Properties window. Now the Properties window will be very important in this course because as we add these various controls from the toolbox to our form, then we will be able to determine how they look and how they operate by filling in their properties in the Properties window. Well, let's do a simple project just to illustrate how this whole thing works. First, let's select the form, and when you select the form or any control, then you will see these little sizing handles. So there, for the form, you'll see them on the left side, the right side, the bottom, and at the corner. So you can resize the form by selecting those. we want to use the properties window to just set some basic properties for this form. So let's go do that. The properties window is located here at the bottom right. We're going to be setting two of the properties. So I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to select the name property. The name for the form is going to begin with a standard prefix called FRM, and I'm just going to call the form 1, FRM capital O-N-E. Now whenever you're typing a name property, then you cannot use any special characters, you cannot use spaces, so be very careful about that. After you've given the form its name, then we want to change the title that shows up in the title bar. The default is just called Form 1. So let's go to the Properties window and scroll down, and we'll find the text property. Okay, when you select text, then you can type in a different title to go in your title bar. It can be whatever you want. So I'm just going to call this my first project again. And when you're typing a value in for the text, then you can use special characters here and spaces, as you can see that I've done. Now when you're typing, this does not immediately appear in the title. You have to hit the enter key or click away from the this particular property, the text property, in order for it to show up. So I did that. I just hit the enter key, and now it says my first project. Alright, let's do something really simple to this. Let's just add a button to the form. So I'm going to select the button control from the toolbox, and I'm going to just click it to select it. Then I'm going to move the cursor over the form, and I'm just going to drag and draw, and that will drop a button there for me. There are two other ways that you can add a control to a form. One way. The second way could be you could just place the cursor over the control in the toolbox and double click. When that happens, that control will just pop up on the form. Then you can move it and you can resize it using the resizing handles. The third way that you can add a control to a form is to click once to highlight it, then click and drag and release, and you've moved one of the controls from the toolbox onto the form. So three ways to do this. You can choose your favorite. I only want one of those, so I'm going to delete the other two that I added. Notice that the sizing handles indicate that a control is selected. So if I click to this one, it's selected. If I click to that one, it's also selected. So you can tell which is the active or the selected control because it will have sizing handles. Okay, if you want to delete a control, then select it and just hit the delete key. Okay, I'm going to delete the third button as well, so I'm going to hit the delete key again. Okay, now I've got the form with one button on it, and I'm just going to move this sort of to the center. I'm going to set the same two properties as I did for the form. So again, making sure that the button is selected, move to the Properties window, select the name property, and I'm going to name this with the standard prefix BTN, and let's call it push, button PUSH. So that's the name. And in order to put some information on the button other than the default button 1 text, then I'll scroll down to the text property and I'll type please push me. Now that will show up on the button as soon as I either click away from this or just hit enter. So there you have it. Now one more thing, there's a font property available, so let's go back to the Properties window and select Font. When you do that, you'll get an ellipsis that shows up here. Click the ellipsis and you get this dialog box that should be very familiar to you. So it's got the font face, the font style, and the font size, so you can select all those. I'm going to choose Arial, so I'll start typing AR, and then this list is sorted according to what I type. So then I can just click Arial, and let's click bold, and let's make it size 10, and then click OK. So now I've changed the font. Alright, well that's enough. Let's suppose that this then was all we needed to do for this project. In order to see how it will look when you run or when this project is executing, then we can click the little green arrow on the toolbar. Alright, so we can click that, or we could hit the F5 function key. Alright, when this begins to execute, and it's off screen, so I'll need to bring it back in, this is what it looks like. So now you see that the surrounding frame of the form is highlighted like other title bars, and as the cursor is placed over the button, it changes colors, and if you click the left mouse button over the button, then it changes a little bit so that it responds as though you were pushing the button. Alright, so if we're finished with this, then we can close this out by clicking the X at the upper right. And now we want to save the project. When you save your project, you need to be very careful. You need to make sure that you save all of the files. So let's go to the File menu, and you'll see a number of options like you do again with most Windows applications. You can save the form, you can save the form as, and then there's a Save All. You need to be sure that you always select Save All. Always do that. If you select Form, then it will not save your complete set of project files. So make sure that you select the Save All option. So I'm going to do that, and I get a dialog box that comes up. Alright, now the way this appears is the name of the project shows up here as the name, and at this point you could change it if you wanted to. The location is C, Temp, and Harden. In order to locate where you want to save the files, you can either type in a full path here, or you can use the Browse button and locate a directory and folder where you want to save your files. In this course, I recommend that you always use the C directory or the C drive and the temp folder. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to that from here. So I've brought up this dialog box showing the C drive. So I'll open it up, and I'll open up the temp folder, and I'll open up my folder, or select it. So that is where I want to save everything. So I recommend that you create a folder under temp with your last name as well in order to save everything. So that's the folder I want, and this will show up here. So make sure you've selected a name that represents the project and the location. When you've done that, look at these two check boxes. Okay, I recommend that you do not have that one checked. If you have it checked, then it will create another level of folders, which just is a little bit too complicated. So uncheck that and click Save. Okay. Now you did not get a confirmation, as you do in most cases with Windows applications, but now your files are saved to the folder that you specified in that last dialog box. If we want to make sure that it's there, then I'm just going to go bring that up. I'm going to go bring up the file browser. I'm going to go to Drive C, Temp, Harden, and locate my first project 1. I've got some other projects in there, and when I open that up, then you see all those files, and this is what you should expect. There should be 9 or 10 different things in this listing. If you see those, then you have saved your file and your project correctly. Okay, so we can close this, and that concludes the initial venture into how to use Visual Basic, the Visual Studio version 2010.